Well, folks, so glad to see you. About the time you think the weather's getting better, it doesn't. And it's just a nasty evening out there, so I encourage you all to be very careful going home. Don't want any mishaps at all. My appreciation for those who filled in for me last Wednesday night. Had a family emergency we had to take care of, and I think Brian was the one. And so my thanks to Brian for teaching the class. May I say that one of the good things about being the preacher here is that you know that you have people who can back you up almost at a moment's notice. I know congregations that if the preacher's out, they have to bring in another preacher from somewhere. We would never have to do that. We have people here who are very capable. And Brian, I'm bragging on you, and you're not even here to hear it.
Isn't that the way it always runs?
But I appreciate it. You filled it in for me last week. We are going to deal with 3 John tonight. I don't know if we'll get the whole book done or not. It is the shortest chapter in the Bible in the Greek language, not in English. It's a little longer than 2 John in English, but if you were reading it in Greek, it would be slightly shorter than 2 John. So while you found that, and I told Kenny I would not put this meme in the bulletin, but I will tell you one that I saw today. It said, my prayer is that the deacon who is on blood thinner is the one who adjusts the thermostat today.
I'll take care
of it. You're on blood thinner? Okay. Let's have a prayer together. Our gracious Father, we are thankful to you for all your mercies, for all of your blessings. We are so undeserving, and we recognize that. Though we don't understand how you can love us the way you do when we are so disappointing to you, we're thankful for it. We're thankful for your word that gives us information as to how we're to live. We pray tonight as we open up this little book of 3 John that we would learn some things that will help us in our daily walk. Pray that you would be mindful of those who can't be here tonight. The weather still is not very good, and there are people who would have difficulty driving and getting here. Would you bless them and be with them? But thank you for those who have come tonight. Bless us in our study together. I pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Did you ever wonder what daily life was like in the first century church? I've often said that if we were to stumble into a worship service from the first century, I don't think we would know where we were. They didn't do it just like we do. No. They did what we refer to as the 5 acts of worship. But they probably would have been in somebody's house. They would have been sitting on the floor. They would have been watching one another. They would have been singing to one another. Somebody would have a word of exhortation and would stand up and give that, and somebody else would do the same. And it would just have been a very different service. Wonder what daily life was like. Wonder what the people were like. Do you suppose that one of the things that hasn't changed is people? We have different names and wear different clothing, come from a different section of the country, that's for sure. But do you think they were just like we are, or are we just like they were? Now, the reason I pose those questions is I think 3 John does as much as any book that I know of in the Bible in explaining that. Because 3 John is a very personal letter written by John. It's not written to a church. Now, there's some church stuff in it, but it's written to a person. And if you read 3 John, you'll find that 3 different men are mentioned in 3 John. That's besides Paul, or John rather, who identified himself as the elder. But there's a fellow named Gaius, and he is the recipient of the letter. There's a fellow by the name of Diotrephes. He was the one who wanted to be the big wheel. And let me tell you, John, bless his heart, spared no words in talking about Diotrephes. And then there's a fellow by the name of Demetrius. And he is held up as a good example to follow. So what I want to do tonight is look at 3 John in view of the 3 men mentioned there. So we'll take it that way. And we'll start first of all by noticing some background and then talking about Gaius. The author identifies himself as the elder. Sound familiar? Where have you heard that before?
Previous books.
Yeah, 2 John, yeah. He identifies himself as the elder. And that's taken 2 ways. First of all, his advanced age. I take the position that this was written in 995 AD. I know there are some who think it was written much earlier, but I'm not one of those. I think it was written 995 AD, and he was an elderly man. But I think "the" in front of it identifies it a little more clearly. John, and I mentioned this last time, is the last living apostle. All of the others have died, been put to death. John's the only one of the apostles who was not martyred, was not put to death. He died a natural death. And so maybe he is using "the elder" as to say, I'm the last one, you need to listen to me. Because one thing makes me think that is when he gets to talking about Diotrephes, he speaks with great authority. He doesn't give you just some idea. He speaks as an apostle, the elder. If I'm right about the date, 1995, it was written from Ephesus. And the reason I would conclude that is that John lived out his life in the city of Ephesus. His declining years were spent in Ephesus. And so it's natural to think that he was there, he wrote a letter, and so the place of writing was Ephesus. There's a fellow by the name of Dionysius. Now, I don't expect you to know these names, but Dionysius was one of the early church fathers. Now, you understand what I mean when I use the term church fathers? These were real big leaders in the early church. If we were to name some people today that are just widely known as being leaders in the church, you get the idea. Dionysius of Alexandria was one of those, and he lived in the 3rd century AD. So that's fairly close to what's going on here. And he says John wrote it. So there's no question in his mind, in his writings. He attributed 3rd John, as well as 2nd John, as well as the Gospel of John, to John. He's going to mention that he's writing this to a man by the name of Gaius, the elder, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Now, what would you like to know about that? Maybe who this Gaius was? Would you be interested in that at all? I don't know. I led you on for that one, didn't I? There are 5 men named in the New Testament named Gaius. That's 4 others besides this one. We cannot know which of those 5, or which of the other 4, or this one it was. Or if it was one of them, maybe there's a 6th Gaius floating around out there someplace. Gaius was a very common name. And so when you say Gaius, it's like saying Tom or Dick or Harry today, you know. It's just a very common name. You would find lots of people who hold that name. It's not uncommon, even in a congregation like this, to have multiple names. I've got a Jeff over here and a Jeff over here. And so it would not be uncommon in a church for there to be more than one Gaius, or certainly as member of the church someplace, more than one Gaius. What we do know about this Gaius is really good. He's beloved. John is not afraid to speak his heart. You know, in lots of places, it's just almost taboo for men to voice any kind of affection for another man. Women can do that. Women can say, "Oh, I love you," and they kiss each other on the cheek, and nobody thinks anything about it. But if a man does that, there are people who wonder more than just a little about what's going on with that. John is unashamed. He just says, "Gaius, I love Gaius." And I want you to notice the sphere of that love. I love him in the truth. Now, we mentioned back when we were looking at 2 John that there are some words that appear over and over. One of them is love. John's not afraid to talk about love. And the other one is truth. And so it's interesting that he threw both of those in here in one little short verse in talking about Gaius, that he loved him. And the sphere of that love was the truth. John was big on the truth. He believed there was truth. If you listen to philosophers these days, they tell you that there is no such thing as absolute truth. You'll hear somebody say it this way, "Well, that's your truth." And they're implying that, well, maybe you have a truth, and you have a truth, and you have a truth, and somebody else has a truth, and it's just whatever you want it to be. John didn't feel that way. John believed in the truth. Jesus would identify that in John 17:17. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. Yeah. As far as John was concerned, as far as the Lord was concerned, the truth is the Word. There's no difference. If you preach the Word, you preach the truth. If you preach the truth, you preach the Word. And so he identifies Gaius as someone he loves and whom he loves in the truth. Now, the first bit of his prayer for Gaius is an interesting one because of what it may infer. And I'm going to ask you, if we put your name in there and this prayer was prayed for you and granted immediately, how would you be? Beloved, so he goes through that again. I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. Now, what does that tell you about Gaius? You read that little bit of John's prayer, and you tell me what it says about Gaius.
He was sick. Maybe he was sickly. Weak.
I think that he may very well have been unwell, a sickly person. Does it tell you anything else?
Sounds like he's doing a lot for the gospel, a lot for God, because his soul's prospering.
His soul is prospering. But he's not prospering in all things. That may have reference, I think it does, to his finances, and I'll tell you why I think that in a minute. So if I had to say what I believe this verse is saying, John is saying, Gaius, you're not very well off financially. And your body is not in A1 shape. But boy, your soul prospers. Now, go back to my question. Let's suppose that John were to pray that for you. Put your name in there. And he were to say, I pray that you would be in health physically as you are spiritually, and you would have in health financially as you are spiritually. And woof, there it is. How would you be? Would you say, man, I'd be healthy and I'd have money in the bank? Or would you say, that's scary? Because my soul's not prospering very well. And so I might not be too well physically, and I certainly wouldn't have a lot of money. Do you find that interesting? Do you find that part of the prayer just to be an interesting thing? That John gets right to the heart of the matter. And for Gaius, he wants him to be healthy and wealthy because his soul is healthy. Questions you want to jump in there?
Well, too, if you're strong in the faith and you have the means to do other things, you're doing more than, if your health is bad, you can get out, spread the word, teach the word.
And I think that's...
others do that, encourage others, because you're weak.
I think that's right, Brian. To ask for some people to have money would not be a good thing. Because if your soul's not healthy, you wouldn't know what to do with it, you wouldn't handle it correctly. And that'd be a real problem, wouldn't it?
It'd be like a weed, it'd overtake you.
Yeah. Yeah.
God was concerned about his physical life and his spiritual.
Yes. And see, we don't think about that much. But that's valid. It's valid for us to pray for one another physically. Lord, so-and-so is having a really tough time now physically, not doing well. Bless him. It's all right for us to pray for somebody financially. And certainly all right for us to pray for somebody spiritually. John put all of those together. Now the question comes up, why was he not prospering in all things? Why was Gaius impoverished? Let me read a little bit more, and you'll see if you jump right on this. For I rejoiced greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk into the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers. What would cause Gaius to be short on funds? Helping others. Not only brethren, but strangers. Or maybe it's strange brethren. I'm not sure. Yeah, there you go. I made the point last time that when preachers traveled, some churches had preachers that would stay a little while. Paul stayed a little while at one congregation. But mostly they were traveling preachers, evangelists. And they relied on the brethren wherever they went to take care of them. They didn't put them up in a motel. Somebody said, come on, stay with us. So you went and stayed with them. They provided room and board and got nothing for it. Now, if Gaius was doing that, can you see that might have stretched his finances a little bit? Till he didn't have a lot? Did that stop him? No. He just said, John just says, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers. The text which modern translations are written on, not that your King James was translated on, says, and especially strangers. Now, this doesn't mean guys on the street. What were these strangers?
Just Christians they didn't know.
That's right. Just preachers he didn't know. I don't imagine he said, here, fill out this form here. But these were just Christian evangelists who were traveling. He didn't know them, but that didn't keep him from saying, come on in. Let me take care of you. And John says, I am so happy to hear that you're doing this. I'm so happy to hear that you're walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in truth. Now, some have jumped to a conclusion here that may or may not be true. Can you understand what some might think based on this?
His children, or what children meant?
I'm talking about, that was an obtuse question, and I'll go back and rephrase it. That some of my children walk in the truth. What do you think that refers to or can refer to?
It could be people he's led to the Lord, or it could be churches he's planted, or it could be his physical
People that was under his care.
Yeah.
That's the way that I think.
There are some who believe this means that Gaius had been a convert. Some heard John had interfaced with him and had had been responsible for him being a Christian. That may or may not be so. But at least it's something to think about. And so he writes to Gaius and says, Gaius, you're doing a good job. You're taking care of people, these traveling preachers. You don't even know them, but you just take them into your house and you give them room and board. And whatever you do faithfully. Now, how did John get this information?
Well, it came back to him.
Yeah. If people are traveling, they're going to travel where John is, and they're going to take the word to John. Yeah, that's right. And so the word is going to get back to John that Gaius was a good man, a faithful man, a generous man, a hospitable man. And it says in verse 6, some of these brethren who have borne witness of your love before the church, if you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you will do well. Now, got a question here for you just in a minute. But the word had come to John, and that word was that he's doing this, he's serving the church, and you send them on their way. Now, what about this phrase, in a manner worthy of God?
He's not forcing them to go. He is encouraging them, welcoming them, supporting them, and that is worthy of God because you're showing the love of the brother. By that you'll be known.
Okay.
How about how God would do it? How would God send them on their way? How would God love them and provide them?
Okay. Anybody else? Folks, we went through a period in the church, and I've lived long enough to have seen it, where preachers were not held in very high esteem. They rarely stayed in a place very long. 2 or 3 years. They moved on. My dad stayed one place 18 months. And he preached a moving sermon one Sunday. It was about giving. And one old man who kind of controlled the purse strings in the congregation got highly irritated by that, and we were moving. I've known my dad to move from one church to another church for $5 more on the week, just so we could have food and clothing. My mother took in washings. She ironed for people. She did mending of clothes. She cleaned houses. She did whatever she could to make a little bit of money so we could have food and clothing. I held a meeting in a place years and years and years and years ago. If I told you where it was, you wouldn't know. Some of you may have, you hung out in West Virginia a little bit back there, Al. Did you ever hear of a place named Weston? Weston, West Virginia. Weston was, they had an insane asylum there at one time. That may account for some of what I'm going to say. It came to pain me for the meeting. One of the things that preachers would do when they went to held a meeting, they had no upfront knowledge of what they were going to get paid. You didn't negotiate that. You just went. They paid you whatever they paid you. I always say when they gave me a check in an envelope, I would stick it in my pocket, and I wouldn't look at it till I was well down the road because I didn't want them to see me cry or yell rejoicing, because I had no idea. Held a meeting for this place. One of the men worked as a clerk in a 5 and 10. He made $1 an hour. He said, there's no preacher in this world worth more than $1 an hour. So they paid me $8 a day for the time that I was there. Didn't consider my being away from home and taking care of my family back home. Had no concern for my travel expenses. I got $8 a day. Now, I have other stories I could tell you where I just screamed when I looked at the check and thought, really? They don't pay preachers this much. I'm not worth this much. I think the takeaway here is that Gaius treated them right. He just didn't give them a sandwich and send them on their way. He provided well for them at his own expense. He sent them on his way in a manner worthy of God. Jeff, this is one of your phrases you use in your prayers often. Do this in a manner worthy of God. I think Gaius sent them forward on a way in a manner worthy of God. Okay, I'm not looking for a raise or anything. I'm already paid more than I'm worth. But the reason for that is I couldn't live on what I'm worth. And so, thank you. Elders are generous.
You were right, Sean.
Who have borne witness of your love before the church. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you will do well. Because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. He says, these traveling preachers, they preached to the Gentiles, but they took nothing from the Gentiles. Why would that be so?
I'm thinking that it's probably talking more about unbelievers here, rather than, because most of the converts are Gentiles. And now they're Christians.
You're exactly right. That Gentiles here does not necessarily mean Gentiles in the flesh, but it was just the name for everybody who wasn't a Jew and wasn't a Christian. And so he says, you've sent them on their way well, and they've taken nothing from unbelievers, lest they be accused of preaching for money. Paul would sometimes take money from the brethren. Sometimes he would work. He was a tent maker. He had a job that he could go to and could make money. He didn't want anybody to think that he was in it for the money. And John doesn't want anybody to think that his fellow preachers are in it for the money. We therefore ought to receive such that we may become fellow workers for the truth. So what did John see? Anybody who helped somebody go preach.
That they were part of it.
Fellow workers for the truth. In preaching, in whether it's a missionary work or whatever it is, there are those who are sent and there are the senders. And you need both. You need somebody who's willing to go, but you need somebody who's willing to help them go. And a church, I know the arguments I've heard, like you're supposed to take care of your own first. And I have yet to find a verse that says that. The verse that I find says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's not just a select people at a select place. But I've had churches say, well, we shouldn't send anything overseas until we convert the people here. Where have you been reading? What have you been reading? Our responsibility is to take the word everywhere. And we become fellow laborers, fellow workers. We're helpers in that. We may never go, but we help those who are able to go. Okay? What do you think about Gaius? Like him? Kind of like to have a church full of Gaiuses? People who help and care and are walking in truth and love the brethren and pitch in and help where they can? Yeah. That takes us to guy number 2. A guy by the name of Diotrephes. I wrote to the church. Now, not in this letter. This is a personal letter to Gaius. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Now, we're out of time, or just about. From what you know about Diotrephes, who may he have been in the church, wherever it was, and we don't know?
The head elder.
Huh?
The head elder.
He may very well have been an elder. And the reason you would think that is because when he spoke, that's the way it was. He seemed to have some authority. Now, John's going to tell him he's got more authority than he does. But Diotrephes loved to have the preeminence. Word preeminent means first in rank. It's a military term. And are there some Diotrepheses around? Oh, yeah. Yeah. There are leaders in the church who it's my way or the highway. You either do it the way I want it done, or we'll withdraw from you, or we'll make it so miserable on you you'll want to leave. And we cannot have those. But John, get the right writer here. John's going to address him and dress him down a little bit. He's going to tell Diotrephes he needs to get a handle on it, because he's going to take care of it when he gets there. Okay? Thanks you muchly. I appreciate it. We will see the other classes join us, and then we will have our devotional for this evening.